This is our first event for the Logistics Special Interest Group, or we call it SIG. And today we're having a conversation. And the topic that our panelists will be discussing will be interesting because it is definitely something that everybody has lived through or is living through, which is the disruption and lessons learned for the logistics and distribution industry so this is our special interest group. And the second one is this. I wanted to cover a bit of this, which is our mission. And as you can see, this is something very new. The official launch will be in Q4, November, December time. But we wanted to kind of present this for all those who are here for the first time. It's basically, we want to be able to advance our logistics management for our members by becoming a leading learning community that shares best practices. And we want to support mutual growth. We want to also be an industry resource so that members have improved access to validated high-quality logistics education. And it should be unbiased information. And if you're looking for subject matter experts, that this should be a comfortable place for you to get connected to SMEs, right? The other thing is to increase collaboration with other related SIGs. One of them is the Eco-Sustainability SIG, which started sometime earlier this year. Run through what the format today will be. And just also is my introduction for myself as well as my colleague. So I myself, I do instruct 3 courses at ASCM, the CSCP, and then the Logistics Basics as well as the Lean Basics course. And then for my day job, I'm a product manager at BD in the medication management systems business. And then Amanda, my colleague, is the office manager for ASCM. We will have the format there will be 2 sections, right? So you have 2 sections or 2 opportunities for Q&A. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves. So over to you, Carmen.
Okay, thanks, Tac. Hello, everybody. My name is Carmen Wu. I'm currently the Senior Materials Manager, leading Logistics Excellence at Dexcom. It is a medical device company in San Diego, California. And previously, I've worked in functions such as logistics, warehousing, supply chain, procurement, and business systems for companies such as Abbott, EDF Renewable Energy, and IBM Microelectronics. That's chips manufacturing. And currently, I am a member of the Logistics Special Interest Group within our San Diego ASCM chapter.
Hello, everybody. My name is Homero Escandón. In my day job, I am VP of Supply Chain and Operational Excellence for a medical liquid handling consumables business. We have a presence in San Diego and also a presence in Tijuana, where we manufacture mostly pipette tips, but also some microcentrifuge tubes. In my involvement with the chapter is I'm president. I'm in my 3rd year as president of the ASCM San Diego chapter. And I teach for the chapter every now and then. I also teach for Cal State San Marcos, University of Arizona Global Campus, and UC Berkeley. And I am on advisory boards at CSU San Marcos, at UCSD Extension, and National University.
Thank you so much. Homero, over to you, Jim.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Jim Weiss. In my day job, I am Director of Strategic Partnerships with Jaguar Freight Services. Jaguar is an NVOCC freight forwarder handling ocean, air, and cross-border international shipments all around the globe. My involvement with the chapter is obviously here on the Logistics SIG, and I'm also VP of events for the chapter in my very first term.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's jump to our first section. So the first section, we are going to be talking about the current state of your logistics operations, especially in view of what has happened in the last 2 years. So first question I have, right, is how have your logistics approaches or strategies been affected by COVID-19? And then second part, how has the demand for different shipping services changed? Okay, so this one, I'm gonna direct this at Jim first.
Well, thanks, Tac-Whei. We've been affected in so many different ways, and I think I'm going to have a lot of opportunity to cover this over the course of this discussion. What really jumps out at me is the second part of your question: how has the demand for different shipping services changed? To address that, I would say that the simple answer is to be proactive, and that's with a capital active. If you're able to put long-range PO management in place, and by all means, you absolutely should, and pinpoint cargo ready dates with as much accuracy as possible. And this is because of this massive spike in demand. And now we're seeing some relief from this, thanks to you know, a lot of stockpiling in the U.S. A lot of people have really brought in a lot of product to fortify themselves against port congestion. But it's not, and we're not out of the woods in any sense. So nowadays, the soundest move you can make is to book space 4 to 6 weeks in advance to make sure that your goods leave on the ships. You've booked them all. Any sooner, and the risk you run is of getting bumped, or maybe you've experienced this, or not securing space at all. So, and on the other side of the coin, thanks to port congestion, the high volume of time-critical shipments first slated for ocean transport have shifted over to air, which takes care of the timeline issue fairly effectively, but with increased demand come increased costs and bottlenecks at the airports. Through it all, and you're going to hear this word a lot from me, visibility is going to be the key to success, whichever mode of transit you utilize.
Thank you so much. We will be definitely covering a bit of the visibility question later on. Thanks for that, Jim. For the rest of the panelists, anything that you've, I'd like to extend the question if you have something to add to what Jim has said.
Yeah, I would just add, I think from a supply chain logistics perspective, I think, risk mitigation, like some of the things that Jim had said, right? Planning ahead of time, I think it's important. But I think also like redundancies in sourcing, increasing inventory buffers, and then staffing in different locations, if that's possible, to cover for things like natural disasters, or, if one site goes down, you have another site that can help you recover or cover a part of that lost demand. So I'll just add that.
You talk about redundancies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree with all points, and I would add that in order to get some of these things that we talk about, like resiliency, agility, having kind of more of a risk mitigation type of risk management type of approach, that we're going to need to put into place in our supply chains a structure for that. And what that means is we have to invest in things like digitalization, which is something that's different from just digitization, right? Digitization means you're taking information and you're putting it as data electronically somewhere, right? But digitalization allows you to do things like data analytics and things like that, where you're looking at prescriptive data, predictive data, and you're able to get ahead of things. That's really important.
Thank you so much. That's actually a very good sort of differentiation between digitalization and digitization. I actually haven't heard that before, so that's good. maybe later on we can kind of dive in a little bit more on that. So great. Second question. This one's for Homero. Okay. What contingency mitigation plans did your organization have in place that helped to alleviate the disruption to operations?
You mean proactive plans?
Yeah.
Who had any of those? No, we were, I mean, we were caught by surprise. You know, unfortunately, that's in a general sense, we were caught by surprise. You know, a lot of people say that things like the pandemic and some of the other, let's say, geopolitical and climate things that have really kind of affected our global supply chains, people say, oh, that's, you know, that's the reason why we're having issues. No, the reason why we're having issues is we weren't ready for things like that. And when I say we, I mean collective we, right? And I'm in the same boat. And so now we're in this kind of environment where we're in a near-term reactive mode. And then what we have to do is we have to manage through this near-term mode where we all have bloated inventories, right? We have all this kind of redundancy and risk mitigation where we just put inventory everywhere. We have to get out of that and find more long-term solutions, because inventory is not the long-term solution. It is a near-term fix. Although I do think in the long term, inventories will be slightly above where they were before pre-pandemic. But from a perspective of cost management, you can't have the bloated inventories that we have now. But anyway, I forgot your question.
Contingency and mitigation plans.
Yes. So we really didn't have many. We didn't have, we weren't prepared, and we went into kind of a very reactive mode. We're clawing our way out of some of that, but we're not out of the woods.
Right. What about Jim and Carmen, the rest of panelists? What are your thoughts in terms of contingency and mitigation?
Well, I know from our side that a plan B just isn't enough these days. We need to go all the way up to somewhere around Q. Given that we have to get creative with routing in certain circumstances, we may be coming from China and coming into the East Coast instead of the West Coast. We have to be prepared to do any number of things, and at the same time not overreacting. If you followed this, you'll see that the port of Savannah got jammed up when everybody tried to run off and avoid the West Coast, LA Long Beach, and they all rushed over to a facility that was thoroughly unequipped to handle the spike in volume. So it's not just a matter of being proactive, but not reflexively so. It's a matter of doing your homework and coming up with plan B, C, D, and F that are well thought out, given that these things can pop up at any time. And that's just on this end. That doesn't address COVID shutdowns in China, delays in manufacturing and whatnot.
Thank you. Thank you. Carmen.
I would say, like, I think from my perspective, I'm in warehousing logistics, and I think to mitigate disruptions, it's about making sure that the critical task have 3 deep of people that know how to do it, right? So if somebody is calling out sick or somebody's not able to, for whatever reason, come to work, you still have that critical task being covered. The other aspect is, I think, the process, right? When you look at is the process robust enough that it would just run without people, right? So to me, I think it's investing in potentially robotics. If you're in manufacturing, even in warehousing, right? What are some things that can be done by a robot? Those things I think could also help to mitigate some of these uncertainties in our current climate.
Thank you. We'll definitely revisit that question, because I think there is definitely a talent shortage and great demand, and that's something that is very important for the whole industry. Okay, Third question. This one is for Carmen. Okay. What are some of the biggest operational challenges your organization has faced in the current business climate? And then a follow-up, are you experiencing greater impact on the supply side or the demand side?
Sure. I think the biggest operational challenge is really driven by the uncertainty, whether your business is dependent on the government or some sort of an agency that's outside of your control. Because of those, it would then, from my perspective, would impact our ability to either launch a new product or be able to find the right talent, right, and hire the right people for that specific task. And I think the other biggest operational challenge is really balancing between cost and service. I think, Homero, you've mentioned it before, right? We can't just have lots and lots of inventory and then we run into a problem of obsolescence, right? Potentially, if we don't use it, but you don't want to run out, right? So what's the right balance? And also, paying potentially for more money to deliver goods so that you are meeting your customers' demand. I work in the medical device industry, and we produce a life-saving product. So, we cannot have disruption of our product to the customer. So that is definitely very critical, and that's definitely a balance that we always have to make. And last part of your question is which side, demand or supply, that I'm seeing a bigger impact. I would definitely say the supply side, because the healthcare industry, we depending on a specific product, but typically we don't have the ups and downs like other industries. So the demand side is it's there. The supply side, I would say, either is sourcing the material, transportation, Jim's world are definitely, I think, some of the biggest challenges from a logistics standpoint.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything from the other panelists? Go ahead.
I would just say I've seen both demand and supply side issues and challenges.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to our first chance for Q&A. So for participants, please use either the chat or you can just indicate that you have a question using the Zoom functions, and then you can turn on your camera and ask that question. So please introduce yourself and then ask your question. And please limit the question to about 10 seconds if possible. So I'm just going to give some time to the participants to ask questions if you have any questions right now. Yes, Raul.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for holding this event. My question kind of curtails off of one of the questions that was asked by Tac to the panelists, being proactive and strategies to mitigate supply chain issues. It seems like these are things that cost money to develop and put together, and companies don't want to spend the money on something that's, in theory, could possibly never happen. Do you think that's going to change given, or that mentality will change given what has happened with COVID?
Thank you.
I could start with that if you don't mind. Yeah, so it's interesting because last night I was giving a talk to an ASQ group about this very topic and about how supply chains of the future are going to change. Yes, a lot of the solutions that we are talking about cost money. But I'll go back to the comment that Carmen said, it's a balancing act. Everything we do in supply chain management and logistics management is about balancing and trade-offs. And so you're going to have to, if you make a strategic decision to invest in one area of your supply chain, you have to offset that in some way in another area. And so that may look like automation, right? Maybe I need to have savings over here so that I can, because the investment is better placed on this side with this type of risk mitigation. And so you always constantly, as a logistics person, as a supply chain person, you have to play, it's a balancing act. We actually have a course, I think it's Back to Basics, where we have a visual where there's this lady like balancing a bunch of stuff, right? Because that's what we do day in and day out. And so, yes, you will have to spend money in some areas. You have to offset it in other areas.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, how do you convince your bosses to do that?
Every time you get hit in the face with a supply chain issue, you're convincing them a little bit more. But if it's hard to convince them, then you have to come up with an impact statement. And an impact statement means, if we don't do this, this is what could happen. And really paint the picture. The picture is, this is the catastrophic thing that could happen if we don't invest in this way. That's my best answer. You will not be 100% successful all the time.
Thank you.
So I'll add a little bit to that. So because I lead the logistics excellence team, that question comes to me all the time. You know, I have tons of projects on the list. Why this one? Why now? Right? So you have to come up with an ROI analysis, right? This is how much effort is going to be needed from whatever team that needs to be involved in this improvement. And then this is the expected benefit. And, you know, that's going to also help you to prioritize what are the biggest bang for the buck, right? In terms of what you need to work on in your organization to help move that needle. I definitely agree with Homero when he said, hey, if something catastrophically happened, capitalize on that, right? And say, hey, here are 3 things that we can do to mitigate this from ever happening again. And because that was so painful, right? You now have more people behind your back to really make that investment. You know, the other thing I think it's also, you know, when you're selling your project, it's putting it in kind of a bucket of, you know, this is to prevent certain things from happening again, and this is to make it better, right? So we can scale in the future, right? There are some things that I'm pitching that does not have an ROI, or I can't quantify it, right? Or, you know, maybe it's the reputation of the company, right? It's not having recalls, right? I mean, I think you have to kind of make some of those non-money or not cost related to help you make that business impact statements for your particular project and start really moving that needle. My whole entire team is doing continuous improvement. So I think it's also, you know, convincing that the leadership team, that the folks that are doing the work every day might not have all the resources for them to dedicate themselves to run a continuous improvement program, or to you know, spend all the time to drive these initiatives. So hope that helps you and answer your question.
Thank you, Carmen.
I wanted to actually just add on, because I think that's a great question, is convincing leadership that this thing is worth doing, right? A lot of us face that almost on a daily basis. So the question would be, what type of data have you shown or used that has been effective in telling the story that there's immediacy to this action that we need to take, that convinces them? That will kind of help us, because there's so much data out there, but how do you package this stuff that, you know, makes it so that a attention deficit leader who has so many priorities is able to look at that and immediately understand what you're trying to say? This is for everybody on the panel. Yeah. What has worked? What has worked for you?
I mean, I would say I agree. Data is really important. But this goes back to what I was saying of digitization versus digitalization. It's not good enough to just put data into a database, right? You have to have the ability to do analytics with that data, to put the data into context, to tell a story. And that's really important, because you're absolutely right. I'm a VP. I don't have a whole lot of time. I tell people, people will come to my office and they'll say, hey, I need to present something to you. I'm like, okay, I have 10 minutes before my next meeting. Let's do this, right? So yes, having the data at your fingertips, being able to put it into context, being able to understand what the impacts are, and being able to tell a story is really important, but also knowing your audience, because by the way, I became a VP just 2 years ago. And prior to that, somebody else was in charge of certain areas that then moved into my group. And the people that were presenting data to that previous person knew that he liked to see detailed data. He liked to see spreadsheets. I actually don't. I want to see a trend line. I want you to tell me a visual story, right? So understanding your audience is really important to getting a good reception to what you're presenting.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Any other questions? And just Carmen, I know you talked about continuous improvement. I definitely do see a colleague, Luis Duarte. Yeah, he's also doing CI stuff for BDX for the whole company. So good to have you on board. Any other questions from? Sorry. Yes. Iris? Yes. Go ahead. If you can turn on your camera and we can
it's Angela.
See.
Angela, she wants to unmute.
Oh.
You press your.
There you go.
Sure.
Hi there, Angela Arias. Actually, I did have a question. More so, COVID really, in fact, disrupted the entire logistic architecture. Did any of you have to look at second tier providers? And then what was your lead time trying to move quickly to get it through, or even second tier brokers as you're trying to move materials in and out of different countries?
I know from our perspective, we've always have to have a redundancy system in place. Especially when this all took off and we found our carriers overwhelmed, that the best we could do is have as deep a bench as we could get, if this answers your question. Did that work every time? No, because it's just getting out of port of Shanghai is just one piece of the puzzle. Getting in, you have to do it all over again when in terms of truckers, in terms of rail lines, and in terms of other means of transport to get goods to where they're supposed to go. So we've long maintained a deep bench of second and third tier carriers ourselves, as serving as we are the carrier of record. However, we rely on these resources to get our clients goods from A to B, or really A to D by way of B and C. And so to your question, yeah, for us, it's always incumbent upon us to have those second tier, third tier carriers.
I'll
Thank you.
answer it from
Right.
my perspective, from the logistics. I would say if that particular lane, or probably most likely a customer lane for me personally, is, yes, you have a primary. And one question I always ask is, what is your conference level that you can cover that particular lane? And it's important to gauge and measure their ability to meet their commitments, right? And if they're not meeting what they say that they're able to meet from an SLA perspective, then you need to have a backup. And that backup might be more costly because you need to have that backup standby. And that's what we have to do. And that's the balance between cost and service that I mentioned earlier. Yep.
Thank you so much for your question, Angela. Okay, you will have another chance for Q&A after our next section. So we're going to hit into, so from the current state, we're going to move now to the next section, which is the ideal state, which is the kind of the interesting part, which is how do you future-proof your logistics operations? Before we do that, Amanda, do you have the poll ready? Okay. So please answer this poll. Okay. What do you think is the most important for an organization to invest in? Let's see. So, flexibility and risk management, then resilience. Oh, more coming. Great. 84%. Okay. Thank you so much for all. So flexibility, risk management, and resilience in that order. Okay. Oh, yeah, I know Graham. So okay, so let us hold on, put this back on. Okay, so the next section, future-proofing your logistics operations. So first question, this one's for Jim. Okay, what role has technology in logistics played in dealing with the current global crisis? And how should companies prepare for their future logistics technology needs?
Well, if a company's got access to data and the ability to take insightful action using that data, that's the company that's navigating this period most effectively right now. And the data that I'm referring to is in the form of real-time information on cargo location. It's about PO management. It's about communication with suppliers and vendors on production schedules. And it's on online booking tools. It's what's been the most critical for making decisions. That speaks to visibility again, and visibility through the supply chain has been a key differentiator between those companies that have been threading the needle these last 2.5 years and those who've been getting beat up. So to answer your question, we're going to be more and more reliant on technology. You're going to have to be able to look in and see how the sausage gets made from beginning to end. And then it comes down to not just where is everything, where's my stuff, but who's saying what to whom and when, about what and why. So, because I would think most people in attendance today watching this are somewhere in the deal, are responsible for getting these products over to their end users. There are buyers on the other end that have made large investments, who, especially now over the last couple of years, are dealing with orders placed and not filled for rather extended periods of time. So the way to make things easier for, or at least some bearable for the supply chain manager, is to have that visibility through the entire process, and technology is what enables that. And that said, there's a wetware aspect to this too. You do need to be working with somebody who knows your business. That's the thing. Technology is great right up to a point, but there's still a human factor here where someone needs to be versed in your business. What are your unique challenges? What are you up against? What are your deadlines? What are your consequences for failure? That just a platform by itself is not adequate. So there is going to be a mix of we all love technology. Technology is making our lives simpler to a degree, but there's a human component to this. You do need someone dedicated to your to serving your interests, who can run this through, who can help problem solve and can help construct strategies that are going to lead to your success in ways that simply just an AI platform can't do on its own.
Thank you. How about Carmen or Homero? Jim talked a lot about visibility. I wanted to kind of just dig into that a little bit. What are some of the technologies that your companies have invested in that has given you greater visibility, or is your current visibility kind of sufficient to run your operations?
So I'll take a stab at that. I would say when I think about visibility, I think about knowing what's coming in from a logistics perspective, right? So all my ends, how accurate is the team managing those inventory when they're within the facility in the network? And do we know where they are at all time? And then outbound, wherever we're going, in terms of knowing where they are, and then are we delivering on time? To me, I think those are really basic. And some of the tools that I think it's helpful is, maybe a control tower of some sort, right? Implementing, whether it's transportation related or, materials going into manufacturing as they're exiting, what is the tool that's going to help create that visibility? Is sometimes the ERP system in conjunction with your MES system, your manufacturing system, and your warehouse management system. So I think it's having all of those pieces work together. One thing that I wanted to add is the organization needs to have a mission and a vision of where they want to be, 5 years, from now, and what do we need to do today and invest in order to get us to that point. I think it's really important for organizations to align to those strategies so that these investments can be made.
Thank you. Homero?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, for our organization, we have all the ones you would expect that we have, right? We have basic we have an ERP system, we have, supplier portal, EDI types of things, right? But I think that in order to get us to the supply chain of the future, we need to think completely differently about the types of systems that we need. And it all starts with understanding your supply chain from a perspective of not only the mechanics of it. And when I say understand your supply chain, I mean end-to-end supply chain. If you are what's called the nucleus firm or the channel master, you are the organization that controls the supply chain all the way up and all the way down. You have the greatest influence. And then at that point, if you are that entity, it's your job to understand end-to-end what your supply chain is. And it's your job to understand not only the mechanics of the supply chain, but the vulnerabilities of the supply chain, which means getting to those tier 2 and 3 suppliers or even further and talking to them about what their issues are and understanding and sharing data across entities, more so than just EDI, right? And so I think having a dashboard type of visibility is really important. I always go back to an example of when I was at a company in the past. We actually had one of my departments, their job was to control rotable spares that were throughout the globe. And those spares were line replaceable units in aircraft. And we had this guy who was like this whiz at programming, and we developed this dashboard that every morning I would come into my office, I would open up my screen and that dashboard would be there. And it was a series of these circles, and the circles showed different areas of the globe where we had spares. And if any one of those areas was not green, I could click on that and it could tell me what the issue is. And it could tell me whether we had already addressed the issue by shipping a spare, and the failed unit was already on the way back to the depot and all of that. And I was able to very quickly have at my fingertips that information. And guess what? If there was an issue that required my attention, I was able to immediately understand the issue without having to ask anyone, and I'm immediately able to take action and start doing things. So I think we need to think more in the way of, remember I said earlier, you have data, you put data into a system, you make sure it's accurate and complete and harmonized and all of that. But then at that point, you need to move up to measuring, analyzing, and predicting that, measuring and analyzing that data and making sure that it allows you to see things from a predictive fashion. So that's kind of my take on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Next question is for Carmen. From your perspective, how do we build flexibility, resilience in logistics, and share what your organization has done so far?
Sure. I'll probably just answer this question generically. It could probably apply to any organization or any group in general. And I answer it in 3 parts. So I think the first part is to have a very clear goal and vision for your organization. So top down, everybody understands why they're coming to work every day, right? And they know what defines success for that team. And then now it allows you to then empower your employees to make decisions that align to those goals and values that you have put out. Because you're setting the direction that you want to go. So I think that's the first part. You need to have that so that you're empowering your team. And then the second part is, building the culture and the people within the organization. So, when I look at how I build my team, I look at what is the organizational strategy and what is my team's strategy, and what skills are needed to achieve that strategy and the goals within my organization. And then I hire people that meet those expectations, or I look at my people and develop them to meet those expectations. So training and cross-training if need be. And be open to having team members try things and fail. It's okay to fail, but whenever we do something, we need to be cognizant about why we're doing something. And if we fail, we should try something else. We try another way to do it. So encouraging that type of innovation within the organization, I think, is important. And always want to share success and share challenges and lessons learned, just like we're doing here right now. I think it's important for people to step up and say, hey, I've had those challenges. And you say, here's how I have come through the other end, and here's what I've learned. And then, from building the right behavior and culture perspective, one of the things that my team has done is, we came together as a leadership team when we identify how do we want the culture and the behavior for this organization to work, and then identify what are the actions that we need to do, whether it's better communication, or getting feedback through surveys, increasing our transparency, doing newsletter, and et cetera. So we're doing all of the above to help build that culture piece. Now, all of that can help you build robust process and systems, right? Once you have the right people to help you, one of the things that my team does is we actually look at the process and we make sure it's documented right, so people have a standard way so that it's repeatable and consistent and reliable, right? So, your process documented. And going back to Homero's point, are we measuring things? Is it on time, accurate, cost, right? What is the goal and how are we measuring through those performances? Assess the effectiveness of your process. And then from there, if you find gaps, you want to continue to up your bar, right? Once you start measuring, you will see the rocks underneath the water, and you will be asking a lot more questions about, hey, how can we make this process better? How do we get from 99% to 99.2%, right? And then now you have those continuous improvement opportunities that Rahul was just asking, right? knowing that, hey, here's how we can get better and serve our customers better at a lower cost. And I think a key is it's always have dedicated time for your people, you know, like maybe say like, hey, 10% or 20% of your time, you know, I want you to work on this project. It's part of their development plan. So it does take a conscious effort to build flexibility and resilience from my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments from the other panelists?
Certainly. I think Carmen's comments just now and Homero's before that illustrate those things that are incumbent upon people in providers in my industry. I think that lays it out very succinctly. On the one hand, you need to provide the technology to give the transparency and the visibility that Homero was talking about, so you can take predictive action. And it comes down to learning a specific company's culture, what their objectives are, what their successes and failures have been, and what it's going to take to accomplish their objectives within the context of their company culture. So it is a balance between the purely technological and that human factor that's not going to go away for any time in the foreseeable future. At least I hope not, because I think that going strictly 100% technological and cutting the human factor out, I think there have been plenty of instances where things work great on the platforms right up until they don't, at which point the things tend to fall apart. So from the transportation side, it's incumbent upon all of us in our field to give the clients what they need in both the technological and the human context.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we've got 9 more minutes. So this question will be for Homero, which is with increasing global uncertainty, for example, effects of climate change, geopolitical conflict, what are some best practices or risk management strategies that help future-proof your operations?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that we've already talked about. I would like to add a little bit of color to some of those things. So first of all, we talked enough, I think, about the digitalization and having data at your fingertips, right? Mm-hmm. Data takes the place of inventory, right? So having inventory as a buffer is usually because you don't have good, solid data to work with. So that's really, really important. But I think more than anything, we need to understand our end-to-end supply chains. We need to understand the challenges. We need to dig in with our partners and understand their challenges and their vulnerabilities so that we can then address them. We need to understand what are the things that could happen at any point in time and try to get ahead of those things. I do believe that effects of climate change are going to continue. So, for example, at my company, we have a very critical supply line from the Gulf of Mexico area. And anytime it's hurricane season, guess what we're doing now? We're monitoring the weather on a daily basis. We're checking to see, is there anything we should be looking for, right? Because although hurricanes may not be increasing in the number of hurricanes we're seeing, they're increasing in severity, right? And the type of disruptions and damage that they're causing, right? And so that's a really important aspect of it. So we have to think outside of the box, right? Now we're not only supply chain professionals, we're monitoring the weather as well. So that's what is mostly what we have to do, is think outside of the box, get away from our traditional ways of doing things, being creative. I know most supply chain professionals are highly, highly creative and innovative. And so we need to channel that energy and really come up with ways to address vulnerabilities, but you have to understand your supply chain first. And then you have to implement continuous improvement. That's really important. And in order to implement continuous improvement, you need project management skills. So you must be a good project manager as a supply chain professional. And then also we need effective transformational leadership from, if you are in a supply chain leadership role, understand that your role is change management.
Thank you. Excellent points. Okay, we are at this time where we're going to open up. We've got 6 more minutes. Just want to open up the time to, oh, we have Angela as a question. Please ask. Yeah, turn on your cameras and you can ask.
Yeah, more so just an applaud, because anybody who works in distribution and is a leader, they're in 80% of what they do is change management. How do you encourage? How do you make sure you do that? So thank you so much for calling that out, Homero.
Yep.
And then we have Raul.
Hey everybody. So my question is kind of a general one, and it kind of maybe brings us back full circle to what this conversation was about, is COVID basically, and how it affected all of us in our roles. How come, COVID caught everyone off guard in your personal and or professional opinions? There were some in the medical community who started to discover that, hey, this is where it's spreading and how it's going and how it's gonna reach across the world. This was relatively slow moving compared to like, an immediate weather event, such as like the volcano that erupted in Europe, maybe 10 years or so, and, changed everything, and, whole of airspace was shut down. So how come people were so, in your opinion, I guess, so slow to react from a supply chain standpoint, to maybe recognize the impact that it would have?
Thank you, Ro.
I may be editorializing a bit, but I think there's a human tendency to gravitate toward the explanation that gives the most positive outcome, like, oh, it's nothing, it's the flu. It's nothing, you get over it. And then by the time it catches up to you, you realize, at the time you're realizing it's more than that. What this did is come in and expose the weakness of the system as it exists, with so much offshoring, so much reliance on foreign manufacturing, so little investment in infrastructure, that when something like this did hit, then it came down pretty fast. But I think there was a general tendency among people to think it's going to be okay, it'll pass.
Yeah,
unfortunately, that's true, Jim. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think there, we have to understand the nature of how the system was designed. The global logistics system is a system of rotating rotable containers, essentially, right? And so anytime you have a disruption, it's churning, right? On any normal day, it's churning. And then if there's any disruption to it, it's a complete shock. It's chaotic. It's catastrophic, right? So what we talk about is, in the future, we need to have those things like redundant manufacturing, regionalized supply chains, flexibility in our supply chains to say, when there is some kind of catastrophic thing that goes on, that I can quickly pivot to this other option that I have. And that's really what we're talking about here, because you're not going to change the nature. We're not just going to go out and build millions and millions more containers because we need them, right? That's just not going to happen, right? So we have to design our supply chains in a way to be flexible and have quick pivots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the only thing I'll add, Rahul, is I think a lot of the organizations, I would say pre-COVID, they might be focused on cost reduction, right? So they can really increase their profitability. And because that's their focus, right? All of the outsourcing is occurring, and now you only have one source of your material, and that's the only lane that you're going to get your material. If there's any weather issues, right, then I guess you're going to have to wait, right? So It's now we're going to pivot to what Homero just said. I think it's about risk management, right? Understanding the whole network, where all of the risks are, and then figuring out how to mitigate those risks, high to low. So that's how I think that we can mitigate it. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons why we're in the situation that we are in.
Go ahead, Shreyas.
Hey guys. So I'm an intern working at a company called Carmen based upon Boston. As we're heading into recession as well, do you think the lead time is going to be like, will it get back to normal anytime soon, or is there going to be any disrupt in the ports? If at all there's going to be disrupt in the lead time, and is it going to be affecting the west side of the states, or is it going to be affecting the eastern side of the states? Just wanted to.
What I would say going forward is just keep expecting the unexpected. I think if we're waiting for a return to pre-pandemic norms, we're kidding ourselves. I think we should brace ourselves for continued chaos. I think there are other things in our storms in our horizon that whether it's a new pandemic, whether it's we just dodged a huge bullet with the tentative agreement with the rail unions. I think risk mitigation is going to be the buzzword, the buzzwords going forward for, really, there's no way to predict that when things are going to flatten out. Whatever the new normal is, I don't think we're there yet. I don't, unless you just want to say it's going to be chaotic. It's going to, not to torture a metaphor too much, but turning the steamship around is going to take a long time. I think personally, just a personal opinion, I think we let this go too long. I think we let our systems become archaic and obsolete, and made ourselves vulnerable to what we're continue to experience. And so, as industries respond to the current chaos, we're going to see new things emerge that will perhaps flatten things out. But as far as making a prediction as to when things are going to go back to normal, I would not even put my neck out in that way. I would just say, look, just expect the unexpected and prepare for it, and work with, make sure within your own firm you're preparing for it, make sure the suppliers you use are prepared for it, and have a full grasp of the situation and are agile and flexible and able to respond quickly to whatever the next challenge is going to be.
Well, thank you all for participating. I know we are at time. If you can, there is a final poll that we really would appreciate if you could do so. Amanda's going to put that up. And if you, please do that. Please check out our website. We really appreciate if you can kind of answer this very quick poll. Helps us do continuous improvement on our side. And then there are events that will be coming up. This particular Logistics SIG will have the official launch will be in Q4. And so we will have more news on that coming soon. For all of those who did join, I want to thank you very much. Please do reach out to us if you need to extend this conversation with any of the panelists or have interest in other things, the courses that we're also running. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you, panelists. Really appreciate all your input. Hopefully this has been valuable to all, and we'll be having more events, such events coming up, so look out for it. Thank you so much.